I want to continue my series on St. Jude Thaddeus, and I want to look at some information about Jude from the Bible, also from the ancient texts. There's different sources for the story of St. Jude Thaddeus, and probably the most complete version of the Assyrian people themselves is what's called the Doctrine of Adai. And this tells the story of Thaddeus, Jude Thaddeus going to Mesopotamia, evangelizing the city of Edessa. And of course, has the story of King Abgar, the healing of King Abgar. And as I go through this series, I'm going to touch on every aspect of the story of St. Jude Thaddeus. What I want to look at today is the story of Caesarea Phillipi. Years ago, I was able to go to Caesarea Phillipi. I won a scholarship with Biblical Archaeology Review magazine. Every January, they have a excavation edition of their magazine, and they feature different sites where do biblical archaeology. You can volunteer actually, or pay, or a lot of times it's volunteer. But of course, there's a lot of expenses. I have been to the Holy Land once before, so I won the scholarship. It didn't pay for everything, but I thought, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have won a scholarship to go to Israel. Actually, as in, I guess it's kind of the Golan Heights area, and participate in this archaeological excavation. And we were excavating Bethsaida, and Biblical Archaeological Review actually did a article, because there's two sites. In Aramaic, Bethsaida means the house of the fishermen. So that's what the big industry was along the Sea of Galilee. So there may have been more than one place that was called Bethsaida anyway, but which is the Bethsaida of the Bible? An important thing about Bethsaida as well is it's a place where Jesus did miracles. It's the original hometown of Philip and Andrew and Peter. Of course, they moved to Capernaum. So Peter had a house in Capernaum. It was really amazing. While I was doing this excavation, I was able to, in the evenings, the weekends, I was able to go out and travel. Not too much in the evenings. We would, it was a great experience. Of course, we would start early. They'd give us breakfast. We'd go out to the field and excavate all day long. And it's get dirt all over the place. It was kind of a dirty job, but it was a blessing. So we went to Capernaum, or I did, and Franciscan archaeologists excavated Bethsaida, and they found Peter's house. Some people say, how do you know for sure? I think there's enough evidence that it's very likely that's actually Peter's house. It's interesting. They built a church on top of it with like a glass floor, so you can go inside the church and look down into Peter's house. And the archaeologists did report. Well, we know in ancient times a church was built around the simple fisherman's house. Very ancient church, very ancient. I mean, the fisherman's house dates the time of Jesus. So in ancient times, they believed that this was Peter's house. It was a fisherman's house, and based on all of the excavations, the Franciscan archaeologists thought it was a reasonable conclusion, and I'm sure it's most likely correct.
This is the house of St. Peter. What early Christians from the late 1st, early 2nd century believed was this house of St. Peter, which is so ancient that it's most likely the actual site. So that's it, St. Peter's house. And this is a description of what we have here. Aerial site. Excuse me, it's pretty amazing. So this is St. Peter's house. Valerie. Somebody. Here, could you hold this? Let me get in the... Point it towards me. You see me?
Yep.
Okay. This is St. Peter's house. According to discovery, an old church, a Byzantine church, was built over a first century fisherman's house. And they found inscriptions in here which led the archaeologists to believe that Christians in the late 1st, early 2nd century believed this site to be the actual house of St. Peter. So whether it is or not, it's probably a very ancient tradition. And being that old, it's likely that it's an authentic site. Here it is. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, these are pretty cool. Split video.
Now you can see the shape of the octagon, and
Built a church over there. Remains of St. Peter's house. It's actually not a museum, but an actual church. It's amazing. You can look down there. See the ruins.
So I had a really good experience, and one of the things I did is we went to some of the other I think Australian and New Zealander volunteers. We went to Caesarea Phillipi, which is also called Paneas, and according to the traditional Aramaic account, this is Jude Thaddeus speaking. He says, "For I also, whom you see, am from Paneas, where the river Jordan goes forth.
Yes.
And I was chosen with my companions, by which, behold, the regions everywhere resound with the glorious name of the adorable Christ. Let therefore no man of you harden his heart against the truth, and keep his mind at a distance from verity. Do ye not lead? Be ye not led captive after thoughts destructively erroneous, which are full of despair and bitter death. Be ye not overtaken by evil customs of the paganism of your fathers, and so keep yourselves, and then by doing so, keep yourselves at a distance from the life of truth and verity, which are in Christ. For those who believe in him are those who are trusted before him, who ascended to us by his favor, to make cease from the earth the sacrifice of heathenism and the offering of idolatry, that creatures should no longer be worshipped. We should worship him and his Father with the Holy Spirit. For I, as the Lord commanded me, behold, I preach and publish." So I actually enjoyed the doctrine of Adi, and it's got the story of Jude Thaddeus, but it has a lot of good biblical evangelical theology about conversion and spiritual rebirth, being saved. So it's a good reading, but it's interesting. According to this ancient source, Jude Thaddeus was from Paneas, which is also called Caesarea Phillipi, which figures a very important manner in the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth. So we went up there, and it's called Paneas because there's a sanctuary to the Greek god Pan. It's kind of interesting. I was looking at this. He's a satyr, right? What's a satyr? Well, I guess it's a man from the waist up. He's got little horns, right? And a little grotesque face. And waist down is goat, right? So he has hoofs. It's like the traditional way we conceive of the devil looking, actually, right? And how did they? Well, the word Pan comes from panic, because somebody going through the woods, all of a sudden you stumble upon this creature, and it's interesting. Satyrs are mentioned, it's like 3 or 4 times in the Bible, and of course we think of this as a mythological creature. So what is the Bible talking about? I guess these would be seen as demonic entities, and Jesus seems to allude to that. Some people looking at Pan as a demonic entity, they would call Caesarea Philippi or Paneas, the place where he was venerated, as the gates of hell. Right. So it's a very interesting place. Jesus went there with his disciples. I think the region is Gaulonitis, and it was ruled over by, of course, King Herod the Great had sons who succeeded him. Most notably, Herod Antipas, who's mentioned several times in the scriptures. Then you had, was it Herod Archelaus? He was deposed, and then Herod Philip. And Herod Philip ruled over this area, and he built Paneas up as Caesarea Philippi, naming the city after himself, and also naming it after the Caesar, right? It's a way to win his favor, I imagine. So let's look at the story, very important story of what happened. Not only did St. Jude Thaddeus come from, according to the ancient accounts, come from Caesarea Philippi. This is where Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do men say that I am?" So let's take a look at this.
Thaddeus, Mari, I know who you are, apostles of the living God. Do you come to torture me before my time?
Silence and come out of him.
Satan, we cast you out.
I'm free. What is this that even the devils obey?
We are
Who
apostles
are you?
of Jesus of Nazareth. Come and follow us, and we will teach you the true path of God.
Rabbi, we did great miracles in your name. Even the demons were subjected to us.
Do not rejoice because you have power over Satan. Instead, rejoice because your names are in heaven. While you were out preaching, who did people say that I am?
People said you were Elijah, returned from heaven.
Others say you're Jeremiah or one of the other prophets reincarnated.
King Herod says you are John the Baptist, resurrected from the dead.
But who do you say I am?
You are the Christ, the Son of God, the Son of Man.
It is not flesh and blood that has revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. Therefore your name shall be Simon Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail. I am the Son of Man, and the Son of Man must suffer many things. He shall be rejected by the chief priests, and the elders, and the scribes, and he shall be killed, and after 3 days rise again.
This is the Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, looking at verse 27. Jesus and his disciples left for the villages around Caesarea Philippi.
Yes, sir.
On the way, he put this question to his disciples. "Who do the people say that I am?" They told him, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, and others John the Baptist, others Elijah, others again one of the prophets. But you," he asked them again, "who do you say that I am?" Peter spoke up and said to him, "You are the Christ."
Yes,
and he
sir.
gave them strict orders not to tell anyone about him.
Right.
And then he told them, began to teach them, the Son of Man was destined to suffer grievously and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and put to death, but after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. Then taking him aside, Peter began to rebuke him. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said to him, "Get behind me, Satan, for you're not thinking as God thinks, but as human beings do." He called the people and his disciples to him and says, "If anyone wants to be a follower of mine, let him renounce himself and take up his cross and follow me. Anyone who wants to save his life will lose it, and anyone who loses his life. Anyone who loses his life for my sake, for the sake of the gospel, will save it. What again then is it for anyone to gain the whole world and lose his soul?
Yes.
For indeed, what can anyone give in exchange for his soul or his life? For if anyone in this sinful, adulterous generation is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in the glory of his Father and with his holy angels." We need to bear the reproach of Christ and the reproach of the cross.
Yes.
So many people
Right.
compromise their integrity, their
Right.
beliefs, for passing glory or for security in this world, not having an eternal perspective. So sometimes I think about some of the leadership in the military.
Yes.
And it's like, what are these generals, what are our commanders doing sometimes? And it's like, instead of us doing what's right for the soldiers, they think about the retirement or what the news media is going to
Right.
say. What about their devotion to the United States Constitution? We're all going to face the judgment seat of Christ.
Yes.
And I mean, those who sell out, it says here, what shall it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose their soul? So we see people denying our Constitution and our government, denying Christ and their faith. I saw this movie a few years ago, and one thing that really interests me is the Christian church in Japan, and they call it Kokori Christian, the secret Christians in Japan who suffered unbelievable persecution for so long. The amazing thing is that there was like 300,000 Christians in Japan. Then the Dutch and the British convinced the shogun to repress Catholicism and put people put to death in a horrific manner. So the movie Silence is about some Jesuit missionaries who are trying to go and reconnect with the church, but the person he focuses on, Martin Scorsese, and that was the guy's name, Endo, the Japanese author of this book, was someone who apostatized. And the movie seems to be suggesting it's like, it's okay to deny the Lord or apostatize as long as you're true to you secretly remain true in your heart. But I don't think that's true, right? And there's so many people. You see some individuals in the film who embrace martyrdom, and their heroism, their courage inspires us. But Martin Scorsese, who made a blasphemous movie, The Last Temptation of Christ, he extols and praises compromise, fear, denial, and blasphemy. So the sacrilegious movie, The Last Temptation of Christ, it's terrible. And he's a very talented director. Actually, somebody could go through The Last Temptation of Christ to make a good movie out of it, probably 30 minutes long. So it's sad to see that he does have perspective and talent, and yet he didn't use these abilities to glorify God, but to mock and blaspheme. There's going to be accountability for that, right? So this is very important. I've said this before, and I want to mention this again. Jesus says, whoever desires to come and follow after me, let him deny himself, pick up his cross, and follow me. And for at least 3 of the apostles, this wasn't a metaphorical cross. This is a literal cross. Peter was crucified upside down in Rome. Philip was crucified in Hierapolis, which is today Turkey. Andrew was also crucified in Scythia on an X-shaped cross. And there's different traditions, but it's possible that one of the other apostles might also have been crucified. I think Bartholomew was crucified, but was taken down from the cross and survived, only be martyred in a later time. So we have a cross to bear. Are we willing to bear the cross? I think there's that old hymn, must Jesus bear his cross alone and all the world go free? No. There's a cross for you, and there's a cross for me. Also, I want to look at something. I'll mention this and explore in another lecture. Who do men say that I am? Some say John the Baptist, who was beheaded. Others Elijah, and others again one of the prophets. So there's a lot of similarities in the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth and Elijah and Elisha. And Elisha operated with a double portion of the spirit of Elijah. So there's that. We know Scripture says that Elisha operated in the spirit of Elijah. So I have another teaching, which I'm going to give soon, where I explore, yes, John the Baptist came in the spirit and the role of Elijah as the forerunner. But the spirit of Elijah was also upon Jesus. And in some ways, more than it was upon John. But John played the prophetic role. Malachi, the Messiah would come. The Elijah would come to prepare. So the spirit of Elijah dwelt on John the Baptist, came in the role of Elijah preparing the way of the Lord. But that's a very deep and interesting teaching. I want to look at the other account. It's about Peter. In the Catholic Church, of course, they believe, it's an article of faith, that Peter is the founder of the Catholic Church, the Church of Rome. So in Matthew chapter 16, we see a different account. Scholars believe that Matthew's gospel was composed in Antioch, which, according to the book of Galatians, is the city that Peter went and ministered in before he went to Rome. Now, the stories of Peter in Rome are very ancient, and I believe they're true. Some Protestants like, oh, no, Peter didn't really have this role. And we see that Jesus rebuked Peter. And Paul in Galatians also rebukes Peter. That could be something good about Peter, that, obviously he's able to take reproof sometimes from Jesus and then from Paul himself, and yet he still, like Protestants reject the idea of papal primacy. Peter, they reject that, but I think that scriptures are clear that Peter has primacy. In the Gospel of John, it seems to elevate the position of John above that of Peter. John's leaning on Jesus' bosom, Peter's a little ways away in the table. So other things where John brings Peter into the trial of Jesus, or in the courtyard at least. John goes to the empty tomb first and believes on seeing the empty tomb. So there's other indications of that. But as much as the Gospel of John elevates the position of John, it concedes that Peter had this important role as well. So all the lists of the 12 apostles in the scriptures, Peter is first. That doesn't mean James, the brother of Jesus, was apparently had authority over Peter, but he wasn't one of the 12 apostles. He was the brother of Jesus and the bishop of Jerusalem. So I think it's the role of Peter as the first of the 12 apostles. It is clearly taught in scriptures. And since I guess Matthew goes to Antioch, he writes this gospel. And since Peter had been in Antioch, we see a greater focus on Peter than we see in the other gospels. Like the story of Peter walking on the water is only found in Matthew's gospel. And also a statement here. We read the earlier account by Mark, but let's look what it had, how it's recorded here in Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he put this question to his disciples: who do the people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. But you, he said, who do you say that I am? Then Simon Peter spoke up and said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, this is only in Matthew's gospel, Simon, son of Jonah, you are a blessed man. You're a blessed man because there's no human agency that revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. So now I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of the underworld can never overpower it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom. Whatever you bind on earth, we bind in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth, we loose in heaven. And he gave his disciples strict orders that they were to tell no one that he is the Christ. So Luke chapter 9 also has the account of Caesarea Philippi. And I don't think it has this unique Petering, these unique statements about Peter. They're unique to the Gospel of Matthew for the reason which I mentioned. So Luke 9:18, we have the story, and it's very simple. Actually, it's more condensed than what we see in Mark's Gospel. But let's look at it. I mentioned Elijah. Elijah and Elisha, they fed multitudes with, a few pieces of bread. They cleansed lepers. They raised the dead. They gave deceased children to their widowed mothers. So there's these similarities, and people expected. Like, for instance, when Jesus is at the Nazarene sermon, his first sermon, he mentions Elijah. When he was on the cross, he cries out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And the people, he's saying in Aramaic, he's quoting from Psalm 22, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? It's Aramaic. Right. The soldiers thought he said, they thought, when they heard Elaha, or Eloi, they thought he was calling on Elijah, because Elijah means, Elijah in Hebrew is Eliyahu. Yes. Elahu, let's see, Elahi and Eliyahu. I guess, it sounds similar. So they thought he was calling on Elijah. So we see Elijah invoked at the very first sermon of Jesus, his inaugural sermon, but also there at his crucifixion. And I mentioned how James and John are trying to, when the Samaritans rejected Jesus, they wanted him to call down fire from heaven the way Elijah did. So people recognized the power of Elijah operating in the ministry of Jesus. Jeremiah, why is Jeremiah mentioned? He's the weeping prophet. And I think it's Luke's gospel mentions Jesus looking on Jerusalem and weeping over the city. Yeah. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, my heart's desire was to gather you to my bosom like a mother hen, but you would not.
Right.
Therefore, destruction is coming upon you. One of the other prophets, I mentioned this before, I don't believe in reincarnation.
Right.
But the Greek philosophers did, like Plato. He writes about it in his books. So this is a known concept. It was believed. And I believe it's the Hasidic Jews to this day believe in reincarnation, or at least certain sects of Hasidic Jews. You have, I remember this controversy, it's been several years ago, where some rabbis said that perhaps the Jewish victims of the Holocaust were atoning for sins in previous lives. That got people upset. He said, "Well, I'm not." He says, "I'm not saying that they deserved, the Nazis weren't bad, but people they criticized him for making those comments." And this was like a Hasidic rabbi showing that they believe in that concept of reincarnation. I think it's found in the Aramaic Kabbalah and other texts. So apparently, certain Jews believe that perhaps Jesus was a reincarnation of Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. Now, Elijah did not die a natural death. He was carried to heaven. He wasn't translated like Enoch, but he's one of the few people in the Old Testament who didn't experience a natural death, but was transferred to heaven. So let's look at these other, Simon, son of Jonah, you are a blessed man. Man has not revealed this to you, but my Father which is in heaven. Therefore I say to you, you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. So here in Antioch, the idea that Peter went to that community, as the book of Galatians says he did, that was very important. And they're here recording what Jesus Christ himself said about the status of Peter. Later on, Peter went to Rome, but Antioch and Rome are two cities. Now, the fact of the matter is, Peter probably didn't found the church in Rome. Apparently there were Christians there before Peter went, and probably the same thing is true of Antioch. But when you have an apostle, one of the 12 apostles going to that town, to Antioch or Rome, then those places are associated with that one of the 12 apostles. And like I was mentioning before, some of these ancient communities have been destroyed by the Muslims, or in the process of being destroyed by the Muslims. We're talking about the Assyrian Christians. St. Jude Thaddeus founded their community. In India, Doubting Thomas founded their community. I guess in Byzantium and that region, Andrew, the brother of Peter. And then Peter went to Rome. So these places are associated with apostles, in Antioch and Rome with Peter. So, upon this rock I will build my church. Now, what Protestants try to argue about is like, well, what is the rock? Is Peter the rock? Is Peter's statement of faith that Jesus is the Messiah the rock? Look, of course, the statement of faith that Jesus is the Messiah is the rock upon which the church is built. But look at Peter's epistles. He says we're all stones. And it's the testimony of Peter and the 12 apostles on which everything is based and founded upon. So Peter's a rock upon which the church is founded. I think that's indisputable. That doesn't mean the Pope's always right, but that's who Peter was according to the Scripture. We follow the Scriptures. We follow Jesus Christ. Honestly, I respected Pope Benedict. He was a very godly man. He was a good theologian. Made mistakes like everybody else does, but he served Christ in devotion, but also in truth. Wrote commentaries in the Bible, focused on Jesus Christ. That's the way forward for Christian unity. Pope Francis, of course, the world hated Pope Benedict because he's affirming Christian tradition. The world hates the truth. Jesus talks about this in the Gospel of John. Pope Francis is more popular. because he's taking up left-wing causes, and a lot of people in dominant positions of authority and power like that. So while they attacked the papacy of a man who was striving to be faithful to the gospel and to Christian tradition as much as he understood it, I'm not saying, of course, I'm not Catholic, so I don't agree with everything he said, but I believe that's his intent. The world attacked him. So you have another pope who's concerned about left-wing politics, and he receives the world's praises. It says something very important here, and the gates of hell, or the underworld, can never overpower the church. So far, the church has endured. This is very interesting here. Either the Greek word Petros, or even as it seems its Aramaic equivalent Kepha, was used as a personal name before Jesus conferred it on the apostles' leaders to symbolize that he was the apostles' leader, that he was the part which he used to play in his community. And it says, this change of name had possibly been made earlier. According to the Gospel of John, Simon, the son of Jonah, was called Peter by Jesus when Jesus first met. You read that in the first chapter of the Gospel of John. He looks upon him and says the Aramaic form, you are Kepha. But upon Peter he's going to build his church. It's interesting, it says here that the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. And we see the great gates of hell trying. We're in a great spiritual conflict. And it seems people think that, Christianity is the way out. It's in decline. Church membership is declining. But we'll see what happens. This commentary, this is the New Jerusalem Bible. Greek, Hades. Hebrew, Sheol, the dwelling place of the dead. Here its personified gate suggests the powers of evil, which first lead people to that death, which is sin, and then imprison him once for all in eternal death. The church's task is to rescue the elect from death's dominion, from the death of the body, and above all from eternal death, so that it may lead them into the kingdom of heaven. And this church follows its master. Of course, Jesus descended in the overworld. Jesus descended into the underworld, conquered death, hell, and the grave. And the Eastern churches is very, and we talked about this before, the herring of hell. How Jesus conquered death, hell, and the grave. There's a lot of deep teachings here. We'll discuss later. Mentions the keys of the keys of the kingdom. On the front page of the King James Bible, you can see these. You see the apostles, and usually in icons of the apostles, they're seen like Peter. Andrew has the X8 cross. I think Simon the Zealot has a saw because they sawed him in two. Thomas has a spear because he was pierced through with the spear. Peter, his symbol is the upside down cross.
Yeah, he's crucified upside down.
That's right. But his other symbol is the keys of the kingdom. Right. I want to mention about the upside down cross. Satanists have tried to co-opt that symbol, But it's St. Peter's cross, because Peter, according to the ancient traditions, Gospel of John says Jesus prophesies to Peter that when he's an elderly man, he will be taken to that, be stretched out and taken to that place he doesn't want to go. I mean, he's prophesying that Peter's going to be crucified. I don't see how else you could read that the way it's described. It's describing the process of crucifixion. So Peter was crucified upside down because he says, well, I'm not worthy to die in the same manner in which my Lord has died. So they crucified him upside down. So probably in the late 60s, Satanists began turning the cross upside down, not to remember St. Peter, but to try to do it as an act of sacrilege. Right. And then the movies, horror movies, have promoted that. So it's kind of sad, It's just like the rainbow, right? The rainbow is the symbol of the new world, of hope for the future, of goodness, of God's covenant with man, that he's going to show us mercy. New beginnings, hope, the meaning conferred upon the rainbow after the flood of Noah. So it's a biblical symbol. But perverts have taken the rainbow and they use it for their purposes, to twist and corrupt a sign that God has given to mankind. And so the symbol of Peter, I think even in the movies, like the Conjuring, which is about these two Christian lay ministers and exorcists. I'm not,
Right.
but in that movie, it's also showing, trying to show the upside down cross as a heretical, blasphemous symbol. But that's not what it originally was. It's to remember the crucifixion of Peter in Rome. And that's, yes, Peter went to Antioch, but Peter was martyred in Rome, and he was martyred in the upside down cross. So that symbol is attached to Peter and attached to the city of Rome. I think if you go to Rome, you'll see upside down crosses there. And it's because Peter was crucified upside down in Rome. And the symbol is to honor Peter and his sacrifice and martyrdom, not to blaspheme, not as I mean, it's the motivation of the heart, right? If someone twists a cross upside down to commit the sin of sacrilege, and then they're committing a sin of sacrilege. But they're misusing a historic Christian symbol. God will judge them for that, right? So we can use this symbol as what it was meant to. So this is very important, and that's why we need to be the church triumphant, right? Who does the devil think he is? People get all scared. Oh, look at these evil forces. The President of the United States advocating perversion, wickedness, harming children. Let's castrate little boys. Let's do double mastectomies on little girls. Cruelty, advocated in the highest levels of our nation. Where does America come to?
I don't know.
Jesus said, if you hurt a child, it's going to be better for you to have a big millstone tied around your neck and be thrown in the deepest depths of the sea. God will judge these people. I don't care who they are, what kind of position you assume or try to take upon yourself. We're all going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ. That's what the equivalent passage, the Gospel of Mark, we see the importance of us keeping an eternal perspective. So, this story is connected to St. Jude Thaddeus because that's where St. Jude Thaddeus came from. It's his hometown, according to the ancient accounts. We read the Aramaic doctrine of Addai. And it was an amazing experience for me to be able to participate in an archaeological excavation of the towns and cities where Jesus' apostles came from, where Jesus did ministry, and to actually go and see the archaeological remains, the city of Paneas, this place that Jesus blessed with his presence, even though it was considered a hellish place, right? We're going to drive the devil out. And we're going to transform places which were dark and sinister. We're going to make them places that glorify Almighty God and deliver them. The gates of hell cannot prevail against God's truth. Jesus Christ is King of Kings, Lord and Lord of Lords, and he's going to reign on earth forever. So we'll conclude with that. So thank you, and God bless you.
God bless you too.